we did want to hit on a topic that's been something that we've discussed several times in the podcast, is people and programs, and what we mean by people and programs, right? The most entertaining thing for me when college baseball starts is we spend this time in the preseason talking about this team grabbed this guy, this team grabbed this guy, this team overhauled their roster, this team brought in a great freshman class, all of these things that go into the preseason analysis. And I used to just close my eyes and say people and programs. And what did I mean by people and programs? It meant that the people running the program specifically typically is what you want to put your faith into. Arkansas is going to have good pitchers. Even if they don't believe it on January 15th, they're going to have good pitchers. I would bet my life on that. LSU is going to have a really talented and really well-coached roster. They're going to have the combination of the two, right? The teams in UNC is going to play good defense. They're going to throw strikes on the mound. They're going to be really competitive on the base pass, and they're never going to strike out a ton. People and programs. You can spend all preseason talking about what team has from a roster standpoint, but if you put your faith in people and programs, you're probably going to be more accurate come Omaha and the end of the season on what teams actually had a good season.
Yeah, I think it might even matter more because there's so much more roster turnover now, and the opportunity to grab really good players has kind of opened up to even more teams, just because of the portal and roster restrictions and all the things we've talked about on here for the weeks leading up to today. I think that the people and program thing is how you build consistency. And when you can have continuity too on the coaching staff, I think it's even more important when you have a bunch of coaches who have worked together for years on years on years. It continues to help you kind of build the program. And I think what starts to happen as well is you start to attract the right type of people, right? Because the players on the field will always matter. That's not what we're saying, right? But what we are saying is you can analyze and figure out what that team's going to look like if you know the coaching staff and if you know the head coach and if you know what type of program they've put together and how those people operate. And then I think, the players come in is you start to attract the people who succeed under those types of guys, right? Because everybody's different and all these coaches. I mean, if you think of Tony Vitello at Tennessee, they were obviously one of the easiest examples to pull because their players played a certain way, they acted a certain way, and that was a reflection of their head coach. And if you brought someone like me into that program, not that I was ever talented enough to play there, but just from a personal standpoint, I probably wouldn't have succeeded there. I'm not an outward person. I don't like to show a ton of emotion. I wouldn't have probably fit in that great. But if you understand that that's who you are and those are the type of people that succeed in your program, you go and get players that do show emotion. They play with their heart on their sleeve. They like to have that pent-up energy. Those guys are going to be extremely successful there. So I think it is all about the people in the programs and what you can build and why every coach we talk to talks about building something that's sustainable, especially nowadays, because it's easier than ever in college baseball to catch lightning in a bottle for 1 year. You can do it. There's a way to do it. If you work hard enough, if you get the right guys in the portal, if you hit on some guys in your high school recruiting class, you can catch lightning in a bottle, go on a run, whether that means you're a conference tournament champion, whether that means you're an at-large in a regional, whatever lightning in a bottle is for you, it's possible to catch it more now than ever. But you want to build sustainability. You want to build a program that has an identity, that has a culture, that has a heartbeat, that is similar every year. And then, it's going to change because of the players on your roster every year, but the core kind of covenants and the principles of the program stay the same.
Yeah, and again, at the end of the day, what we're saying about people and programs is culture, right? And program culture and what it means to be a part of that, again, I'm going to use the word again, culture, right? That program and what those players buy into and what the message of the coaching staff is on both the people and how we treat our teammates and how we act on the field to the player development side, right? And you talk about catching lightning in a bottle. And I think even breaking that down further is like, I think at the mid-major level, you see a lot more of like teams that'll quote unquote surprise you, right? Like a lower level, even a mid-major program that gets the right 35 guys on the roster, talent, they buy into the message, and it's a 1 year thing where it's like we got everybody that was good, and then everybody's either drafted or into the portal, right? Because there's so much more roster turn, at least at the top of your roster at that level. Very rarely are you getting guys that are just like fully committed to be there for 3 years, even though they're all conference guys every year, right? Or all American level players, right? So I think at that level, it's exciting about, but even in like the Power Four, which is where a lot of the coverage is for the sport, let's just call it what it is. It's like I can even label, like, if you just like wanted me to do a blind test of like what is this program going to be defined by? It's like Florida baseball, super talented, horribly coached. I could tell you that. I don't need to watch a game to tell you that. Tennessee baseball, a lot of slug, a lot of velo, don't really care about strikeouts. They're going to compete their balls off every weekend. Like, and somebody who watches every game of college baseball would probably be like, yeah, it's pretty accurate. Like Arkansas, a little bit of slug, a little bit too much swing and miss. Pitching staff is unbelievable with unbelievable stuff and deep. Like we could do this for pretty much every team in the country. And I think that's where it gets even deeper in baseball because the sample size is so much bigger, right? Football, I don't think you can do this because you're playing weekly, right? And it's like you have one bad game, you have one rough patch, your season's over, right? If you're trying to turn your
The wrong
roster over as
injury.
quick. Yeah. So like the message of the coaching staff doesn't always translate year over year, right? Good coaches can have bad years in a much like simpler way. Baseball, it's like I could draw up what all these teams are going to be in January, and I would probably hit on 75% of the Power Four, at least at the top of the sport. You want me to do it with the top 25? I think we could.
Yeah, and I think that that's what that's what makes it so hard to win in college baseball as well, because you're always searching to get better and you're always looking to improve things. And when you have to go up against some of these programs that are so established, let's talk about LSU for a couple minutes, right? Like, the talent on that roster is going to be at the top of the sport year in and year out. They attract it, the logo attracts it. You listen to Bryce Harper in an interview and they ask him, if you were to have gone to college, where would you have gone? And like one of the schools he's going to mention is LSU because, the logo, the program, what they've built for years, it's there. And people, top end players, that's a destination for them from where, no matter where they are in the country, right? Like LSU is that. And then you know, Jay Johnson comes in with his pedigree of, what he can do on the offensive side of things. And it kind of changes things to the point where now we're having these top talent rosters. He knows how to manage them. He knows how to build the offense. And even in 24, the year after they won the national title in 23, like that roster, they had so much turnover. They had so many guys leave for the draft. They had so many new faces. And it was like that was an LSU team that didn't quite have the pitching that they had the year before or last year when they won again. But like they were going to compete and they were going to go on a run. And there they were, like knocking on the door of Omaha with a team that like wasn't that good because that's just what Jay Johnson has built there and that's what Jay Johnson can do. And yeah, people sit there and you'll some people who are a little more cynical and a little more negative will be like, "Wow, anyone could coach it when you have that talent." And it's like that's not necessarily the case because your temperament, what you do on a daily basis, the culture that you build rubs off on these guys. They're 18 to 22 years old. They're impressionable. And when you're at a place like LSU, you have to manage everyone's coming in and having been a superstar. Everyone expects to be the next superstar. Everyone expects to be a top draft pick. You have to help them achieve those goals while still being able to play as a 34-man team, right? And not everyone's going to, have the star role. Not everyone's going to be Paul Skeens. Not everyone's going to be Kate Anderson. You have to, be able to have guys fill roles and show them that it's within their benefit to win a national championship at LSU in this role. And that's what a lot of these coaches can do. And a lot of them, when you find what you do well, if you understand what you do well and you don't try to be someone that you're not, because that's another big thing for me is like, you have to understand who you are, what type of player can succeed under you, what you do well, and lean into that. Don't try and be someone you're not, and that's advice that like I think every young coach receives at some point. I remember getting it, you hear it all the time. And it's so simple, but it's so true. Because if you admire someone and you try and be just like them and that is not who you are, you're never going to be able to do it. You have to be you, and you have to figure out what works best for you, and how you can coach to make guys, become the best that they are and make the team come together. And anything can kind of happen then. And if you can stick with those principles and what you believe in, that's when you can get really good and can have year over year success like in LSU.
The programs, and this is all sports, the programs that understand that their identity and stick to it are typically the ones that, like, let's just say, are consistent, right? Like, if you can create that image of, like, this is what we are, we know who we are, like, again, we're going to be an option offense in football, and you just do that to the best of your ability, more times than not, those teams, they might not win a national championship, but they're pretty good, right? We're going to run the rock. We're not going to make mistakes, or we're going to be bombs away offense, and we're going to be an air raid, and we're going to throw the ball 60 times. And if that means we turn the ball over a couple too many times, or our defense is winded, all of those are things that, more times than not, just sticking to your identity and not changing it leads to success. And you see the same thing in baseball, right? Like, and that's from player temperament. That's from a philosophy, right? Not trying to chase, let's just say in the SEC alone, right? Like the power increase post 2020 of just like what that Tennessee team did in 2021, 2022, whichever year it was exactly that they did that, and they were the Bombers, and just like it just became an all power craze. If you're Kentucky, maybe that's not in the cards for you. Their park doesn't play for it. Nick Mingione isn't great at coaching it. And that's not to say he's not a great coach, because I think he's a fantastic coach, because they have an identity. Kentucky's program identity is different than Tennessee's program identity. And that's why Kentucky, no matter what their roster looks like, is always talented, always competitive, always pushing somebody late in May and June and making games and pushing for Omaha with teams that might not be littered with first round picks. And then you go to a program like South Carolina. I guess we should throw some negatives out there. They're chasing ghosts, right? Like they're trying to be something in the SEC. Like they overturned their roster, and already through 2 weeks of the season, like it's hot and heavy, right? Lose to Army on Friday night. Injuries galore, all the things going wrong. And it's like, what is their identity? Well, when you have an outdated coach who probably expired 7 years ago, that probably limits your ability to have an identity, because he doesn't know what the modern game needs. But that's besides the point. Is they're chasing and they're trying too hard to be whoever. And I don't know exactly who it is. I'm not going to name names of programs, but an LSU, an Arkansas, a Tennessee, whoever, right? They're chasing that, and they have no bought in identity for that program. And there's not a consistent message coming from the top. And you can see, like, again, no matter how talented that team is, no matter how many good transfers they brought in, no matter how optimistic they are about their staff or their player personnel, it doesn't matter. In this sport, it needs to come from the top down of a consistent message that guys are able to buy into, believe in, and then roll out and go and compete and be empowered to compete.